Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome to today's Bhagavad Gita Shloka recitation and Mahabharata reading session. Let's begin. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 4, text 1. Please recite. Sri Bhagavanuvacha imam vivasvate yogam proktavanaham vivasvan manave praha manur ikshvakave bravit. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivasvan, and Vivasvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. 4.2 Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshayo viduhu sakale nehamahata yogo nashtaha parantapa. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. 4.3 Sa evayam maya tedya yogaha proktaha puratanaha bhakti rahasyam hetaduttamam. That very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is today told by me to you, because you are my devotee as well as my friend, and can therefore understand the transcendental mystery of this science. 4.5 Sri Bhagavanuvacha Bahuni me vyatitani Janmani tava charjuna Tanyaham veda sarvani Natvaham te Natvam veta parantapa. The personality of God had said, many, many births, both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. 4.6 Ajopi san avyayatma bhutanamishvaropi san prakritim swamadhisthaya sambhavamyatma mayaya. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. 4.7 Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirbhavati bharata abhyutthanam tadatmanam srijamyaham. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. 4.8 Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. To deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion, I myself appear millennium after millennium. 4.9 Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo vetti tattvataha tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti sorjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. 4.10 वीतरागभयक्रोधा मन्मया मामुपाश्रिताः बहवो ज्ञानतपसा पूता मद्भावमागताः. Being freed from attachment, fear and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. 4.11 ये यथा मां प्रपद्यन्ते तांस्तथैव भजाम्यहम् मम वर्त्मानुवर्तन्ते मनुष्याः पार्थ सर्वशः. As all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. 4.13 चातुर्वर्ण्यं मया सृष्टं गुणकर्मा विभागशः तस्य कर्तारमपि मां विद्य कर्तारमव्ययम्. According to the three modes of material nature and the work associated with them, the four divisions of human society are created by me. And although I am the creator of this system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. 434 तद्विद्धि प्रणिपातेन परिप्रश्नेन सेवया उपदेक्ष्यन्ति ते ज्ञानं ज्ञानिनस्तत्त्वदर्शिनः. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. 435 यज्ञात्वा न पुनर्मोहम् एवं यास्यसि पाण्डव येन भूतान्यशेषाणि द्रक्ष्यस्यात्मन्यथो मयि. Having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion, for by this knowledge you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine. 436 अपि चेदसि पापेभ्यः सर्वेभ्यः पापकृत्तमः सर्वं ज्ञानप्लवेनैव वृजिनं सन्तरिष्यसि. Even if you are considered to be the most sinful of all sinners, when you are situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, you will be able to cross over the ocean of miseries. 438 न हि ज्ञानेन सदृशं पवित्रम् इह विद्यते तत्स्वयं योगसंसिद्धः कालेनात्मनि विन्दति. In this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism, and one who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time. 440 अज्ञश्च श्रद्दधानश्च संशयात्मा विनश्यति नायं लोकोऽस्ति न परो न सुखं संशयात्मनः. But ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor in the next. 442 तस्माद् अज्ञानसम्भूतं हृत्स्थं ज्ञानासीनात्मनः चित्वैनं संशयं योगम् आत्तिष्ठोत्तिष्ठ भारत. Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharata, stand and fight. Chapter 5, 5-2. Sri Bhagavanuvacha Sanyasah Karma Yogascha Nishreyasa Karavubhau Tayostu Karma Sanyasat Karma Yogo Vishishyate. The personality of Godhead replied, the renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation, but of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work. 5-6. Sanyasastu mahabaho dukkham aptum ayogatah yoga yukto munir brahma nachirenadhigacchati. Merely renouncing all activities yet not engaging in the devotional service of the Lord cannot make one happy. But a thoughtful person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme without delay. 5-7. Yoga-yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriyah sarvabhutatma kurvannapi na lipyate. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. 5-10. ब्रह्मण्याधाय कर्माणि सङ्गं त्यक्त्वा करोति यः लिप्यते न स पापेन padmapatram vivambhasa. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. 5:16. ज्ञानेन तु तदज्ञानं येषां नाशितमात्मनः तेषामादित्यवज्ञानं प्रकाशयति तत्परम्. When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. 5:18. विद्या विनय संपन्ने ब्राह्मणे गविहस्तिनि शुनि चैव स्वपाके च पंडिता समदर्शिनः. The humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater outcast. 5:20. न प्रहृष्येत् प्रियं प्राप्य नोद्विजेत् प्राप्य च प्रियं स्थिरबुद्धिरसम्मूढो ब्रह्मविद् ब्रह्मणि स्थितः. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the science of God, is already situated in transcendence. 5:22. ये हि संस्पर्शजा भोगा दुःखयोनय एव ते आद्यन्तवन्तः कौन्तेय न तेषु रमते बुधः. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. 5:24. योऽन्तः सुखोऽन्तरारामस्तथान्तर्ज्योतिरेव यः स योगी ब्रह्मनिर्वाणं ब्रह्मभूतोऽधिगच्छति. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. 5:29. भोक्तारं यज्ञतपसां सर्वलोकमहेश्वरं सुहृदं सर्वभूतानां ज्ञात्वा मां शान्तिमृच्छति. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. Chapter 6. 6.1 Sri Bhagavanuvacha Anashritah karma phalam karyam karma karoti yaha sasannyasi cha yogi cha na niragnir na chakriyaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. 6.5 Uddharedatmanatmanam natmanam avasadayed atmaiva hyatmano bandhur atmaiva ripuratmanaha. One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. 6.6 Bandhur atmatmanastasya yenatmaivatmana jitaha anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvat. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. 6.7 जितात्मनः प्रशान्तस्य परमात्मा समाहितः शीतोष्ण सुखदुःखेषु तथा मानापमानयोः. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. 6.8 ज्ञानविज्ञानतृप्तात्मा कूटस्थो विजितेन्द्रियः युक्त इत्युच्यते योगी समलोष्टाश्मकाञ्चनः. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi or mystic when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same. 6.16 नात्यश्नतस्तु योगोऽस्ति न चैकान्तम् अनश्नतः न चाति स्वप्नशीलस्य जाग्रतो नैव चार्जुना. There is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi, O Arjuna, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. 6.17 युक्ताहारविहारस्य युक्तचेष्टस्य कर्मसु युक्तस्वप्नावबोधस्य योगो भवति दुःखः. He who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. 6.19 यथा दीपो निवातस्थो नेङ्गते सोपमा स्मृता योगिनो यतचित्तस्य युञ्जतो योगमात्मनः. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist, whose mind is controlled, remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. 6.20 to 23 यत्रो परमते चित्तं निरुद्धं योगसेवया यत्र चैवात्मनात्मानं पश्यन्नात्मनि तुष्यति सुखम् आत्यन्तिकं यत्तद् बुद्धिग्राह्यम् अतीन्द्रियं वेत्ति यत्र न चैवायं स्थितश्चलति तत्त्वतः यं लब्ध्वा चापरं लाभं मन्यते नाधिकं ततः यस्मिन् स्थितो न दुःखेन गुरुणापि विचाल्यते तं विद्यात् दुःखसंयोग वियोगं योगसङ्गितम्. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, He thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. 624. सनिश्चयेन योक्तव्यो योगो निर्विण्णचेतसा सङ्कल्पप्रभवान् कामांस् त्यक्त्वा सर्वान् शेषतः मनसैवेन्द्रियग्रामं विनियम्य समन्ततः. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith and not be deviated from the path. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of mental speculation and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind. 626. यतो यतो निश्चलति मनश्चञ्चलम् अस्थिरं ततस्ततो नियम्यैतद् आत्मन्येवावशं नयेत्. From wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. 627. प्रशान्तमनसंह्येनं योगिनं सुखमुत्तमम् उपैति शान्तरजसं ब्रह्मभूतम् अकल्मषम्. The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. He is beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme, and thus he is freed from all reactions to past deeds. 629. सर्वभूतस्थमात्मानं सर्वभूतानि चात्मनि ईक्षते योगयुक्तात्मा सर्वत्र समदर्शनः. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. Are you reciting, Isha? 630. यो मां पश्यति सर्वत्र सर्वं च मयि पश्यति तस्याहं न प्रणश्यामि स च मे न प्रणश्यति. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. 634. चञ्चलं हि मनः कृष्ण प्रमाथि बलवदृढम् तस्याहं निग्रहं मन्ये वायोरिवासुदुष्करम्. For the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. 635. श्रीभगवानुवाच असंशयं महाबाहो मनो दुर्निग्रहं चलम् अभ्यासेन तु कौन्तेय वैराग्येण च गृह्यते. Lord Sri Krishna said, O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. 640. Sri Bhagavanuvacha Parthanaiveha namutra vinashastasya vidyate nahi kalyanakrit kaschid durgatim tata gacchati. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. 641. Prapya punyakritam lokan ushitva shashwati samaha शुचीनां श्रीमतां गेहे योगभ्रष्टो भिजायते. The unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. 642. अथवा योगिनामेव कुले भवति धीमताम् एतद्धि दुर्लभतरं लोके जन्म यदीदृशम्. Or, if unsuccessful after long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Certainly, such a birth is rare in this world. 643. Tatra tam buddhi samyogam labhate paurvadehikam yatate cha tato bhuyaha samsiddhau kurunandana. On taking such a birth, he revives the divine consciousness of his previous life and he again tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success, O son of Kuru. 644. पूर्वाभ्यासेन तेनैव ह्रियते ह्यवशोऽपि सः जिज्ञासुरपि योगस्य शब्दब्रह्माति वर्तते. By virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. 645. प्रयत्नाद्यतमानस्तु योगी संशुद्धकिल्बिषः अनेकजन्मसंसिद्धस्ततो याति परां गतिम्. And when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed of all contamination, then ultimately achieving perfection after many, many births of practice, he attains the supreme goal. 647. योगिनामपि सर्वेषां मद्गतेनान्तरात्मना श्रद्धावान् भजते यो मां समे युक्ततमो मतः. And of all yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me, he is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is ki jai. Mahabharata. So we've been reading in Mahabharata how the Pandavas were invited to come back for another gambling match, because the first time when the gambling match ended, Dhṛtarāṣṭra Maharaj returned everything back to the Pandavas. He told Draupadi, ask for a boon, so on and so forth. He got scared by hearing the vows taken by Bhimsen, Arjuna. Dhṛtarāṣṭra Maharaj got worried. So then he tried to make up for that. So he said, I was just testing to see who's more virtuous. Obviously, you Pandavas have won, right? And then he said, you take and you go away. But Duryodhana was very angry. Duryodhana, Shakuni, Dushasan, Karna, they got together. And they were this, what is this? After such hard work we earned, and now the king returned everything to them. But worse than that is, we have insulted them so much. Are they going to leave us alone? They are such powerful enemies. We shouldn't just let them go like that. So somehow or other they convinced Dhṛtarāṣṭra, right? They made a plan that now we'll call them for another gambling match. And in this gambling match, the stakes will be that whoever loses will have to go to the forest for 13 years. The last year, they may come into the cities, but they have to live incognito. If they are detected, then they will have to go back into the forest for another 13 years. And then they went and proposed this to Dhṛtarāṣṭra Maharaj. And at first Dhṛtarāṣṭra Maharaj was not happy. He was saying, no, why are you so worried about the Pandavas? They are good people. Yudhisthira will not attack you. Don't think like that. But then when Duryodhana said, no, just see how we have insulted them. And they are very powerful enemies. And you know what all the citizens are saying? They are going to rebel against us. They are saying that this whole thing is Dhritarashtra's doing, Duryodhana's. They are saying, fie on, Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra. This is not good for us. So what our plan is to send them away to some distant place. And meanwhile, when they are gone, we will prepare. right? We'll have their kingdom also, and we'll prepare for battle, so that when they come back, even if there's a battle, we are in a secure position. Somehow he was talked into that, and Dhritarashtra Maharaj accepted it. So the Pandavas had not yet reached Indraprastha; they were on the way, and he sent some messengers to Yudhiṣṭhira Maharaj. And also, Duryodhana said, we got news from the spies how they were going back toward Indraprastha. Bhimsen is wielding his mace, and Arjuna is twanging his Gandiva. Yudhishthira Maharaj is holding his spear, and Nakul Sahadev, they're brandishing their swords. So obviously they're looking for revenge. We shouldn't just let them go like that. Anyway, Dhritarashtra Maharaj called them back. There was another match, and obviously Shakuni won, and they were sent to the forest. So we saw also after they were defeated shamelessly, Dushasan again started insulting them, taunting them, right? As they say in Hindi, jale pe namak chidakna, right? Already they are humiliated so much, and on top of that, he's taunting them. So Draupadi went to take blessings from Gandhari. She was still dressed in the same way. Her hair was all disheveled because she was handled so roughly by Dushasan. You know, her cloth was covered in blood. She just went like that. And she took, and all the ladies, as soon as when they started, they sent up a wail crying. She embraced the ladies, and then she left. So the Pandavas walked. They walked on the streets of Hastinapur, and the news spread. So all the people in Hastinapur, they lined on either side of the street. They came in large numbers. They just crowded to see the Pandavas, and they were also wailing. And they said, Maharaj, Yudhishthira Maharaj, we'll go with you. We don't want to live under such a sinful king. And Yudhishthira Maharaj said, no, if you really respect me, then you should stay back for the sake of Dhritarashtra, Bhishma Dev, Kunti, Vidur. They are godly persons, so you should stay back for their sake, like that. And they couldn't say no to Yudhishthira Maharaj. Weeping, they went back. So in this way, finally, after they got into their chariots. After crossing the city, they got into their chariots, and they just drove. And by evening, and of course, there were a lot of Brahmins that were following the Pandavas. By the time it was evening, they reached the banks of the river Ganges or Yamuna, maybe. Either way, sometimes it is said Ganges also. They reached there, and there they did their evening worship. All the Brahmanas, they lit their fires, and then they spent the night there, and the next day morning again they did their morning worship. And now the Pandavas had to cross the river, so they told the Brahmanas, Yudhishthira Maharaj said, my heart is breaking, but I must tell you to please go back, because I lost everything in this match. I don't have anything, and I feel so bad, but I won't be able to even feed you. We will just survive on whatever we get in the forest, some roots or whatever, but I will not be able to feed all of you Brahmanas, so please. And Shaunak Rishi said, no, we will take care of our own food, don't worry, we want to go with you. And then Yudhishthira Maharaj once again said, I have no doubt that you'll be able to find your food, but still, I was feeding so many Brahmins in Indraprastha, hundreds of thousands of them, and I won't even be able to provide for you. This is breaking my heart, like that. And then, of course, Shaunak Muni gave some instructions, that by your spiritual merit, right? Actually, that Daumya Muni says. Anyway, he said, no, don't become so sad. These are the ways of life, right? You shouldn't be attached to. You should now work on acquiring spiritual credits, right? Don't worry about that. So still, Yudhishthira Maharaj was feeling. So he expressed his thoughts to his guru, Daumya Muni, and he said, that you should pray to the sun god, because sun god is the one who provided food to everyone long time ago when there was no food to the people. Because by sun and by rain, crops come up and food grains are produced. So sun is responsible, and sun and moon also together. He said, you pray to the sun. Yudhishthira Maharaj fasted. He stopped eating, drinking, even breathing. And standing in the river Ganges, he started praying to the sun god, meditating on the sun god. And after 3 days, the sun god appeared, being very pleased with Yudhishthira Maharaj. And then, understanding Yudhishthira Maharaj's desire, he gave him a copper plate, and that's called the Akshaya Patra. He said, uh, whatever food you place on this plate, it will become Akshaya, it will never be finished. You can feed any number of people, it will still be there. Only when Draupadi eats her meal will it be emptied for that day. And again the next day when she places food on that, then you can feed as many number as you like, it will still have so much food on it. That's called Akshaya Patra. So Yudhishthira Maharaj was very happy. He went back and then now he could feed all the Brahmanas. Right? That's where we stopped? I think so. Okay, so let's see what happened after that. And he gave that plate to Draupadi. So Dhritarashtra's anxiety. Let me just quickly go back and check if we missed any points towards the end. Yeah, when they had eaten, the Pandavas, blessed by auspicious rites and Vedic prayers, set out for the forest of. Okay. Yudhishthira came out of the river with the plate and took hold of Dhaumya's feet in worship. With great happiness, he embraced his brothers and then handed the mystical plate to Draupadi. She immediately cooked a meal. Okay, she also cooked a meal right away and placed it upon the dish. After offering the food to the Lord with appropriate prayers, she served the Brahmins. To her amazement and delight, she saw that as she served from the plate, the food was immediately replenished. It was only when she took her own meal after serving her husband's that she saw that the dish finally became empty. When they had eaten, the Pandavas, blessed by auspicious rites and Vedic prayers, set out for the forest of Kamika. So after they had eaten, right, this was in the morning, well, this was 3 days later. Anyway, they finished eating. So now they set out for Kamyaka forest, accompanied by hundreds of Brahmins. Next chapter, Dhritarashtra's anxiety. In Hastinapur, Dhritarashtra was becoming increasingly sorrowful. He is worried now. What will happen when the Pandavas come back? Also, one more condition that they set in that gambling match was after fulfilling the conditions, that means 13 years of exile, when they return, their kingdom will be returned back to them. That was the condition. So Dhritarashtra is worried they will come back and then what will happen, right? So in Hastinapur, Dhritarashtra was becoming increasingly sorrowful. Needing solace, he called for Vidura and said, "O Khatwa, your intelligence is no less than that of the great Bhargava." Bhargava. Who is Bhargava? Vyasadeva. No, Bhargava is Bhrigu son, I think. Who is that? I'm not able to recollect. Okay. Brihaspati. Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Because Brihaspati is the spiritual master of the. Well, anyway, I'll let you know. Oh, Katwa, your intelligence is no less than that of the great Bhargava. You are acquainted with all the subtleties of Dharma. You regard, huh? Even I was thinking Shukracharya maybe because Bhrigumuni is on their side, on the, yeah, Danava's side. But yeah, I'll check and I'll let you know. It comes in Srimad Bhagavatam when we read about the descendants, Diti's sons, Aditi's sons, there we will read. And also about the children, the descendants of the Prajapatis. Anyway, so you regard all the Kurus. So Dhritarashtra Maharaj is telling whom? Vidur. You regard all the Kurus equally. Tell me therefore, what is good for me and for them? Now that things have taken this course, what should we do? I'm getting angry on Dhritarashtra Maharaj. How much Vidur tried to tell him during that gambling match and afterward also. He just paid a deaf ear, right? Not paying any attention. Repeatedly Vidur was saying he was crying and he was telling, but he never took the advice. Anyway, now when he is in the hour of danger, again he's calling Vidur. So he's saying that You regard all the Kurus equally. Tell me therefore what is good for me and what for them. Now that things have taken this course, what should we do? How can we again secure the citizens' faith and love? Everyone hates him now. How can we again secure the citizens' faith and love? And especially, how can we avoid total annihilation of our race? You see, his mind, even now, he's not concerned for the Pandavas. He's not feeling sorry or bad for the Pandavas. His only fear is what will happen to my race? How will I still hold on to my position? How will I gain the faith of the people once again? Vidur replied, O king, religion as well as economic development and sense pleasure, this is dharma, artha, kama, depend upon virtue. A kingdom's success also rests upon virtue. Therefore, O best of men, cherish and love both your own sons and the sons of Pandu. Right? You've been discriminating from the beginning. You wanted all good for your sons, and you are putting them in so much difficulty. You cheated them, isn't it? So Vidura is saying, love both your sons and the sons of Pandu. You destroyed virtue when you allowed your sons, headed by Shakuni, to play dice with Yudhiṣṭhira. The only way you can now atone for this evil and win praise in this world is to return the Pandavas their kingdom. The first time it was returned, that was good, but you called them again, took away their kingdom. So, the only way that you can atone for that evil, which one? Forcing Yudhishthira to play the dice game, in which it was destined that he would fail, he would lose. So, for that evil, if you want to atone for that, the only way is call them back and return their kingdom. Be satisfied with what is rightfully yours and do not covet others' possessions. Dhṛtarāṣṭra shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He couldn't do that. He didn't want to do that. This was not the advice he had wanted to hear. That's the problem. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. This was not the advice he had wanted to hear. He was more interested in knowing how the Kauravas could secure their present position. That means now they have the whole kingdom of the Pandavas and theirs. They should have that all the time, even in future when the Pandavas come. How they can secure this present position. For that, you give me some advice. Destiny had conferred upon them sovereignty of the entire earth. Yudhiṣṭhira Maharaj was the emperor. So, by cheating Yudhiṣṭhira Maharaj, taking his kingdom, now he's become the emperor. So, by destiny, now I have become, destiny had conferred upon them sovereignty of the entire earth. Now they needed to strengthen their position in order to rule it successfully. What help would it be to concede the kingdom to their most powerful enemies? Dhritarashtra felt his anger rising as Vidur continued to speak. He was not really looking at virtue point of view. O descendant of Bharata, Vidur is continuing, I once told you to abandon Duryodhana. Had you listened to me then, you would not be repenting now. You can still do it. Cast aside Duryodhana and bring Yudhishthira back as the monarch. Let your sons and their followers wait upon the Pandavas. Have Dushasana apologize to Draupadi in the open court, and he should also beg Bhima's pardon. This will be good for all of us, and it will also save the kingdom from destruction. What else can I advise you at such a time? Dhritarashtra's anger boiled over. It seemed that Vidur always sided with the Pandavas and never favored him or his sons. Placing his hand on his bejeweled scepter, he said, O Vidur, you speak only to please the Pandavas and do not care to please me. I do not approve of your words. How do you expect me to abandon my own flesh and blood for another's sake? Although the Pandavas are as good as my sons, Duryodhana has sprung from my body. You ask me to leave my own body aside? in order to favor another's? Although I hold you in great esteem, today I find your words crooked. I therefore reject them. You may stay here or go away as you please. I no longer require your advice. However well an unchaste wife is treated, she always forsakes her husband. This was said by Duryodhana, if you remember. He said that about Vidur. Now it got to Dhṛtarāṣṭra. He's saying the same thing. He's saying he's comparing Vidur to an unchaste wife, right? That means Yudhiṣṭhira, Dhṛtarāṣṭra and Duryodhana, Vidur is taking all benefits from them, but still his love is for the enemy. Dhṛtarāṣṭra rose suddenly and stalked off into his inner chambers. Vidur shook his head sadly and said, "This race is doomed." He decided to follow the Pandavas into the forest and made preparations for his departure. Leaving aside their chariots and carrying only their weapons, the Pandavas had begun to travel in a westerly direction, going from forest to forest. They passed through Kurukshetra and crossed over the rivers Yamuna, Drishadvati, and Saraswati. Finally, on the banks of the Saraswati, they saw the great Kamyaka forest. Many ascetics lined the river bank while performing their sacrifices and austerities. The Pandavas entered the Kamyaka and built thatched huts in which to live. In the company of the Brahmins, they began to devote their time to sacrifice and scriptural study. One evening, as they sat by the sacred fire, listening to Brahmins recite Vedic histories, the brothers heard a chariot approaching. They looked up and saw Vidur coming toward them. Surprised, Yudhiṣṭhira said to Bhima, "Why is Vidur here? Has he been sent to fetch us for yet another game of dice? Does the mean-minded Shakuni wish to take from us even our weapons?" The Pandavas rose from the fire and greeted Vidur with all respects. They settled him in their midst, and after inquiring about his welfare, Yudhiṣṭhira offered Vidur refreshments and a place to rest. The following day, Vidur related to the brothers what had transpired in Hastinapur. O Ajatashatru, I told the king what was beneficial for him, but he did not care to listen. As the unchaste wife of a noble man can never be brought back to virtue. So Vidur is saying, like, Dhṛtarāṣṭra Maharaj is like the unchaste wife. An unchaste wife of a noble man can never be brought back to virtue, right? Somebody who has that type of mentality cannot be brought back to virtue. So the king will not take to the right path. However much we try, he won't take. He will never meet with good fortune. As water falling upon a lotus leaf rolls off, so my counsel had no effect on him. He has sent me away with harsh words. The Pandavas consoled Vidur, and he said, I shall now tell you what, in my opinion, will be conducive to your ultimate success. You should bide your time patiently and find ways to increase your strength. So this is Vidur's advice to the Pandavas. So while you're in the forest, you should increase your strength. Perform asceticism and worship the gods. This will help you gain power. Always speak the truth and be kind to your dependents and followers. Share your food with them and never boast in their presence. This conduct increases the prosperity of kings. So we'll go over the list again. Perform asceticism and worship of gods. This will help you gain power. Always speak the truth and be kind to your dependents and followers. Share your food with them and never boast in their presence. This conduct increases the prosperity of kings. Yudhiṣṭhira thanked Vidur for his advice, which he said he would follow. Then another chariot was heard approaching. This time it was Sanjaya coming toward them. Dhritarashtra's charioteer bowed before Yudhiṣṭhira and was graciously received with kind words of welcome. When he was comfortably seated, he explained to Yudhiṣṭhira why he had come. Having dispatched Vidur with cruel words, the king is consumed by repentance and sorrow. This morning he entered the assembly hall and fell senseless to the floor. He fainted. When he regained consciousness, he said to the assembled kings, "My brother Vidur is like the god of justice, Yamaraj. Remembering him, my heart burns with anguish and grief." Sanjay continued, "The king told me to fetch Vidur back to Hastinapur. He said, 'Go quickly, O Sanjay, and see whether my brother, whom I angrily sent away with harsh words, lives or not. He has never done me the slightest wrong. Rather, he has suffered at my hands. Bring him here soon before I give up my life.'" Sanjay turned to Vidur. "O descendant of Kuru, please return to the city and revive the king. This is his order." He's the king and the king is ordering. Even though Dhritarashtra seemed quite unable to heed his good advice, Vidur decided to return. He loved his elder brother. He knew that Dhritarashtra was intelligent despite his foolish behavior. Vidur felt that if he was near the king and able to offer counsel, then at least there would be a chance that he would come to his senses. After taking Yudhishthir's permission, Vidur returned to Hastinapur and went to see Dhritarashtra, who was overjoyed to see him. The king said, "O virtuous and sinless one, by good fortune have I gotten you back. I could not sleep last night, thinking I was lost." Vidur replied that he had forgiven Dhritarashtra's insult. "You are my guru and worthy of my highest respect. I came here swiftly when Sanjaya told me of your desire, O king. It is only natural that any virtuous man feels inclined toward helping the distressed. Both your sons and those of Pandu are equally dear to me. But because the Pandavas are now in distress, I feel compassion more for them." With apologetic words, the two brothers continued speaking together for some while, happy to be reunited. Duryodhana, however, was not pleased to see Vidur return. He summoned Shakuni, Karna, and said, and Dushasan. He summoned Shakuni, Karna, and Dushasan and said, "The intelligent Vidura has returned. He is always inclined toward the Pandavas." One second. Yeah. He is always inclined toward the Pandavas. Before he manages to convince the king to bring the Pandavas back, let us consider what should be done. If I ever again see the Pandavas flourish, I shall not be able to maintain my life. Shakuni laughed. "What folly are you speaking, O king? The Pandavas have already left for the forest. They will be gone for the next 13 years. They agreed to accept the wager and will never deviate from truth. Even if your father does ask them to return, they would not agree to do so until their exile has expired. Anyway, we do not need to be afraid. We need only pretend that we agree with your father and await any opportunity to overcome them again." Dushasana applauded Shakuni's words. "I like your advice, uncle." Karna looked at Duryodhana, who was still uneasy. "O king, all of us here are your friends and well-wishers. We shall always support you against the Pandavas. You have nothing to fear." But I agree with Shakuni. The brothers will not break their vow. If somehow they do return, then we can find some means to again defeat them. Duryodhana turned away from his counselors. He stood and looked out the latticed window at the beautiful palace gardens. He breathed heavily and ground his teeth. How could he be happy as long as those Pandavas were still alive? Karna said, "I know what you are thinking, O ruler of men. I share your feelings. We must root out the Pandavas once and for all. The dice game has not settled the issue because the Pandavas still live. Karna's handsome face contorted with anger as he thought of Arjun, his old rival. He longed to face him in battle. 13 years was a long time to wait. Striding back and forth, Karna went on passionately. Here is my honest opinion, O king. Now let us put on our armor and take up our weapons, mount our chariots, and go in force to the forest. We will find the Pandavas and kill them. This is a good time while they are destitute and weakened by sorrow. They have no power and no influence. We will easily be able to defeat them. Everyone was stirred by Karna's strong words. His was the right solution. Without hesitation, Duryodhana arranged for a large force to accompany him. With Karna and his brothers by his side, he set out for the forest. On their way out of the city, however, they met Vyasadeva. The sage had seen Duryodhana's plan by his spiritual vision. He ordered Duryodhana to return to the palace. The prince felt chastened, but he dared not defy the rishi's order, fearing the power of his curse. Vyasadeva then went to see Dhṛtarāṣṭra. When he had been properly received and worshipped, he said, O greatly wise Dhṛtarāṣṭra, listen as I tell you what is best for the Kurus. I am not at all pleased that the Pandavas have been sent to the forest through dishonest means. If you do not return their kingdom, then at the end of the 13 years they will not have forgotten their enmity. Without doubt they will kill the Kauravas. Vyasadeva sat upon an elevated seat in the Kuru assembly. He looked at the king, who sat surrounded by his ministers and counselors. They all listened respectfully as the sage continued. Your foolish son now desires to slay the Pandavas. You should check him. If he tries to kill those heroes in the forest, he will lose his own life. O descendant of Bharata, Duryodhana regards the Pandavas with such envy that unless you interfere in his schemes, he will cause the Kuru race to be destroyed. O king, why not send Duryodhana to the forest to serve the Pandavas? He will then be out of harm's way. Perhaps the virtuous Pandavas will even come to like him, although I am doubtful. The nature a man acquires at birth stays with him all his life. It seems impossible that Duryodhana would ever be able to humble himself before the Pandavas or before anyone else. The sage looked around the assembly. What do Bhishma, Drona, and Vidur think? What is your view, O king? You should do the right thing immediately, otherwise, your happiness will be destroyed. Dhritarashtra lifted a hand decked with gleaming rings and placed it against his forehead. Sighing, he replied, O illustrious one, I did not like this gambling business from the beginning. I think I was forced to give my consent by irresistible destiny. Neither Bhishma, Drona, Vidur nor the Queen Gandhari liked the dice game. I have no doubt that it happened under the Lord's deluding potency Maya. I knew all this at the time, but due to my paternal love, I was unable to abandon the envious Duryodhana. O king, I can understand how you feel. The son is always a man's most dear object. But why do you not also see the Pandavas as your sons? They are suffering distress. Why do you not feel compassion for them now? I am now addressing you as my own son. I feel the same love for my other two sons, Pandu and Vidur. You have 101 sons, and Pandu has only five. When I think of Pandu's sons, I wonder only how I may help them. O best of men, if you wish to keep all the Kurus alive, then order Duryodhana to make peace with the Pandavas. Dhritarashtra slowly shook his head, his brilliant crown catching the sun rays pouring through the window. O wise Rishi, it is exactly as you say. I know it well, as do all these kings. I have already heard the same advice from Bhishma, Vidur, and Drona. Somehow, I cannot follow that advice. Please, therefore, be gracious to the Kurus and instruct my wicked son to take the righteous path. Vyasadeva, who could see past, present, and future, said, "Soon the illustrious rishi Maitreya will visit after having visited the Pandavas. He will admonish your son for the sake of the Kuru's welfare. Follow his advice without hesitation, otherwise he will curse your son." Vyasadeva then stood and left the assembly. As Vyasadeva predicted, Maitreya Rishi soon arrived. The itinerant ascetic, right, the traveling ascetic, who carried only a staff and a water pot, was received with all respect by Dhṛtarāṣṭra and his sons. They worshipped him with offerings of arghya and other rites. Dhṛtarāṣṭra then offered him a jewel-encrusted seat in the assembly. When the sage was seated comfortably, the king asked, "O illustrious one, was your journey from the forest a pleasant one? Are the heroes, the five Pandava brothers, living there happily? Will they spend the full 13 years there? How will the brotherly affection between my sons and nephews be restored?" Maitreya looked around the assembly. "While on a pilgrimage, I came to the Kamyaka forest and met Yudhiṣṭhira and his brothers. They now wear deer skins and have matted their hair, and they live there surrounded by rishis. I heard from them of the grave errors Duryodhana committed and of the terrible danger that you now face as a result. Therefore, I have come here to offer some advice. My affection for you is great and I always wish you well." The sage asked how it was possible that the king was overlooking Duryodhana's evil acts. How could both Dhritarashtra and Bhishma have allowed him to create such enmity with the Pandavas? "You are the monarch here," the rishi said solemnly. "You are thus able to punish wrongdoers. For having allowed wicked acts to be perpetrated in your own assembly hall, O king, you have been condemned by the sages. Do you not fear the consequences?" Maitreya turned toward Duryodhana, who scowled at his words. The sage spoke softly. "O mighty armed hero, I utter words meant only for your good, as well as that of the Kurus, the Pandavas, and indeed the whole world. Do not quarrel with the Pandavas. They are all as powerful as thousands of mighty elephants. They are virtuous and possessed of great prowess. With his bare hands, Bhima has slain three powerful Rakshasas, enemies of the celestials, who were capable of assuming any form at will. He killed these three, Hidimba, Baka, and Kirmira, as easily as a tiger kills small deer. Do you remember how that same Bhima killed in single combat the invincible Jarasandha? Who is foolish enough to create enmity with such heroes, having as they do Krsna, Drupada, and Drupada's sons as their allies? Take my advice, dear child, and make peace with them. Do not bring this danger upon yourself." Duryodhana looked away and made no reply. He exposed his thigh and slapped it loudly, then hung his head. Then, stretching his leg as if bored, he scratched the ground with his foot. When he saw Duryodhana's impudence, Maitreya's eyes turned red with anger. He touched holy water and, holding the sacred thread hanging from his shoulder, said in a voice like thunder, "O insolent one, since you slight my words and pay no heed to my advice, you shall soon reap the result. In the great war which will spring from the wrongs you have perpetrated, Bhima will smash your thigh with his mace." Already he had Bhima's vow to smash his thigh. Now he has the curse of Maitreya also. Dhritarashtra immediately became alarmed. He sought to console and gratify Maitreya with gentle words, asking him to be merciful toward Duryodhana. Maitreya said that if Duryodhana made peace with the Pandavas, the curse would be lifted. Otherwise, it would not be reversed. Dhritarashtra felt a little relieved, having managed to mitigate Maitreya's curse. He then said, "O Rishi, we have heard how Bhima destroyed Hidimba and Baka, but not Kirmira. Who was this demon? What was his strength? And how was he killed? We wish to know everything." Maitreya replied, "I will not speak any further in this assembly, because Duryodhana has rejected my words. Vidur knows well the history of Kirmira." And with that, the sage rose and left the city. When the offended sage was gone, Dhṛtarāṣṭra asked Vidur to relate the story. Vidur replied, O king, I heard this story from Yudhiṣṭhira when I spoke to him in the forest. Having left Hastinapur, the Pandavas travelled for 3 days and nights, finally arriving at the Kamyaka forest. As they moved through this forest during the fearful hours of the night, they encountered a terrible Rakshasa with flaming eyes. He stood as tall as a tree and held a blazing torch. With arms and legs outstretched like the branches of a huge sal tree, he blocked the Pandavas' path. He had 8 fangs. Fangs? Fangs, right? Like canines. 8 fangs protruding from his mouth, wide open mouth, and his eyes were the color of copper. His flaming red hair stood erect, and he resembled a mass of clouds charged with lightning and adorned by a flock of cranes. Cranes? Oh, his fangs, I think. White. So, roaring like thunder, he spread the Rakshasa illusion and confounded the Pandavas' senses. The assembly listened spellbound as Vidur told the story. Birds and other creatures dropped down everywhere simply from hearing the demon's awful cries. Deer, buffaloes, leopards, and bears fled terrified in all directions. The forest itself seemed to be moving due to all the fleeing creatures. A violent wind blew up, and dust clouds whirled. Even as grief is the greatest enemy of the 5 senses, so that Rakshasa appeared to the 5 Pandavas. Like grief is the greatest enemy of the 5 senses, this Rakshasa was in that way. He appeared like the greatest enemy to the 5 Pandavas. Spying the brothers from a distance, clad in their deerskins and carrying weapons, the Rakshasa obstructed their path like the Mainaka mountain. When Draupadi saw the horrifying creature, she closed her eyes and stood amid her husbands like an agitated river amid 5 hills. Dhaumya at once uttered Vedic mantras to counter the demon's illusions, and the wind ceased and the dust settled. Seeing his power checked, the Rakshasa opened his eyes in anger. He looked like death himself. Yudhiṣṭhira was stern. Who are you? What do you want of us? The Rakshasa replied, I am Kirmira, the brother of Baka. I live comfortably in this uninhabited forest. I eat all men foolish enough to come here. Who are you that have come today to become my food? We are the 5 sons of Pandu, Yudhiṣṭhira answered. We have been exiled from our kingdom and desire to spend our time in this forest, which is your dominion. When their identity was disclosed, the Rakshasa bellowed in joy. Ha! What good luck! Fate has today accomplished my long cherished desire. I have wandered around in the hope of finding Bhima, my brother's killer. Now he stands here before me at the dead of night when my power is greatest. And when I am hungry, disguised as a Brahmin, this wretch slew my brother and stole his sister. That means he's the brother of both Hidimba and Baka. I shall now wreak my vengeance on him. I will kill him and offer his blood to Baka's departed soul. In this way I shall be freed of my debt to my brother. I shall devour Bhima, digesting him, even as Agastya digested the Asura Vatapi. Yudhishthira rebuked the Rakshasa. This can never be. The mighty Bhima at once tore up a huge tree. Yes, Dhanush.
What is Asura Vatapi?
Which one? Vatapi. Asura
Yeah,
Vatapi.
Vatapi.
Asura means a Rakshasa. Vatapi is his name. So once Agastya Muni, he ate Vatapi. So that's another pastime. Does it come here, Isha? Isha, does Vatapi story come here? Yeah, now? No. So anyway, so there were 2 brothers, demons, okay? So,
Okay.
and one of them is Vatapi. What's the other brother's name? Ilvala. No. There's another name. Anyway, two brothers are there. So they would play practical jokes on people that would come. So one of them, this Vatapi, would become like a lamb, right? Like a goat, like a lamb, sheep. And then they would invite travelers that are passing by, they would invite to their home and they would say, we are serving you a meal, right? And then after the guest eats, so they had this benediction, this Vatapi had a benediction that even if he's eaten by someone, still killed and eaten, actually he comes back to life. So they would feed guests, and when they would come, they would feed him Vatapi, and they would just eat unknowingly. And after he goes inside the belly, then from outside he would scream, Vatapi, come out, come out. And then he would come out, tearing that person's body, and they would eat that person. This was their fun. So once Agastya Rishi also came there, and they tried the same thing. But his brother kept calling Vatapi, come, come. But Agastya Muni was such a powerful sage that he just digested Vatapi. He never came out. So that's why here it is said Asura Vatapi. Sura means demigod. Asura means not a demigod, a demon, Rakshasa. So this Rakshasa Vatapi, how Agastya Muni digested, in that way, I will digest Bhima, this Kirmira is saying. Got it?
Oh, okay. But Bhima is Vayu's son.
Yeah.
He's also powerful. How did he digest him?
He will not, but he's just boasting. This Kirmira is saying, he's a Rakshasa, he's saying, the way Agastya digested Vatapi, that way I'm going to digest this Bhima, because this Bhima killed my brother Bakasur. So I'm
How
going
did
to,
he kill him?
you were not there when maybe you didn't join at that time. But
No.
previous to this, when we were reading Mahabharata, during the Lakshagraha, there's the Duryodhana had built a lakh house for the Pandavas. So his plan was to burn them alive. Anyway,
Oh
then
yeah, I heard of that story, but I didn't know when he killed the demon. I don't remember that.
so after they escaped from that house, nobody knew.
Mm-hmm.
Duryodhana didn't know. So then they entered into a forest and they killed Hidimba. Bhimsen killed Hidimba first. That you must have heard. And then Bhimsen marries Hidimbi also, his Hidimba's sister. After that, Vyasadeva advises them to stay in a village called Ekachakra. So they were living in a Brahmana's house in Ekachakra. And in that village, in that kingdom, the king was not so strong. So this Rakshasa named Bakasur, he was helping, not helping actually. Okay, yeah, Ilvala, that's what I thought. Okay, Vatapi's brother is Ilvala. So this Bakasur, um, the king, because he was not so strong, he would take help from Bakasur so that other kingdoms they don't attack. But Bakasur, because he's supported by the king, now he started indiscriminately eating people, killing people and eating people within this kingdom, king's kingdom. And the king was helpless, he couldn't do anything. So then all the people got together, they went to Bakasur and they requested, my dear Bakasur, we want to make a proposal. Every week, one car, each family in this village or in this kingdom will take his turn, right? So each home, each family will get a turn. And because there were so many people in the kingdom, that family will get their turn only after 3 years. So they will fill a cart load, like an ox cart load, filled with varieties of food stuff with two oxen, and they will send that food to Bakasur. So Bakasur said, okay, along with the food, I will eat also the driver who brings that food, and I will eat the two oxen. So that was the condition set. And in return, Bakasur will protect the kingdom, and also he will not eat and kill anyone indiscriminately because food will come to him. So the house, Brahmana's house in which the Pandavas were staying in Ekachakra, it was that Brahmana's turn. And when Kunti Devi found out, she told them that, okay, my son will go. Although they were appearing like Brahmanas, they were disguised as Brahmanas. She said, my son knows some special mantras because of which he can actually, counteract the demons. You don't worry for his life. So Bhimsen took all the food in the middle of the night and he went to this Bakasur, but on the way itself he ate up all that food. He himself ate up Bhimsen. When he reached Bakasur, Bakasur became mad. Where is my food? Right? No food. And also, uh, but he thought, okay, at least I'll eat. But Bhimsen fought with him and killed him. And after killing him, he threw his head right at the city gates, his body at the city gate. So the next day, when all the people saw them, and also this Bakasur had other friends in the forest, when they all came, they were terrified the way Bhimsen killed, just with his bare hands. And they were so scared. He said, you don't have to, other Rakshasas, you don't have to fear me, but don't disturb the people. You go and live in the forest peacefully. I'm not going to attack you. So they just fled from there out of fear of Bhimsen. So this is what had happened. This is before they were even married to Draupadi and all that, right? After that, they went back to Hastinapur. They got Indraprastha and all that. So much happened. So now, when they're exiled, that Bakasur's brother Kirmira, he's saying, I have been looking for my brother's killer everywhere. I've been looking for Bhima. And when they introduced themselves as the Pandavas, then he said, oh, this is my good fortune. Right? I've been looking for him and he came. So I'm going to kill him because I want to take revenge. He's killed my brother and then I will eat him and I will digest him, he's saying. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, let's continue. So, so now there's a fight between when he said, I will digest Bhimsen the way Agastya digested the Asura Vatapi. Yudhiṣṭhira rebuked the Rakshasa. This can never be. The mighty Bhima at once tore up a huge tree and stripped it of its branches. And in the twinkling of an eye, Arjuna had strung his bow and stood with an arrow at the ready. But Bhima stopped his brother and advanced alone to face the demon. Tightening his waistcloth, he shouted an angry challenge, Stay and fight! Armed with the tree, he rushed toward him. As Indra hurls his thunderbolt, Bhima brought down the tree with force upon the Rakshasa's head. The tree smashed to pieces, while the demon remained unmoved. He hurled his flaming brand at Bhima. Remember, he was carrying a torch. So he hurled that at Bhima, and it flew toward him like a streak of lightning with such speed. Bhima dropped quickly to the ground and turned the torch away with his left foot. Okay. Roaring terribly, the Rakshasa himself tore up a great tree and rushed at Bhima like Yamaraj bearing his death-dealing staff. The two combatants pulled up tree after tree and hurled and smashed them together as they fought. The battle resembled old, the fight of old between Vali and Sugriva from Ramayana. And soon a large area of the forest had been stripped of trees. The angry demon then lifted and hurled a massive rock at Bhima, who caught the boulder and tossed it back. Kirmira rushed at Bhima with outstretched arms, even as Rahu goes to devour the sun. They grappled together, rolled about on the earth like a couple of infuriated bulls locked in mortal combat. The fight was fierce and hard, lasting for almost an hour. Bhima, proud of his strength, was conscious of Draupadi watching him. Then he remembered Duryodhana's insults toward the princess. He's remembering the gambling match. When he looked at Draupadi, he's remembering the gambling match and how Duryodhana insulted. Looking at the demon as if he were Duryodhana, as if he were the Kaurava, Bhima's anger swelled. He seized the Rakshasa like one maddened elephant seizing another. Kirmira also seized the Pandava, but Bhima lifted him and threw him down violently. He then took hold of the demon by the waist and began to shake him as trees are shaken by the wind. Even as he was being shaken, the demon reached up and with all his strength grasped hold of Bhima by the neck. Bhima repeatedly lifted and smashed the Rakshasa down, even as the demon gripped him with hands like steel vices. The earth shook and the forest echoed with the sound of Kirmira's body striking the ground. He roared fearfully like a discordant trumpet. Bhima lifted him and whirled him around with tremendous power. Seeing that the Rakshasa had fallen unconscious, Bhima threw him to the ground. He placed his knees on his chest and strangled him. As the demon died, Bhima said, "O sinful wretch, you need no longer wipe away the tears of Baka and Hidimba's relatives, for you are now going to join them." Leaving Kirmira's body lying on the path, devoid of clothes and ornaments, Bhima rejoined his brothers. They gathered around him and praised him. Again, placing Draupadi in the center of their party, they entered deeper into the forest. Who's saying this whole thing? Vidura is narrating to Dhṛtarāṣṭra Maharaj, and everyone else is there. Duryodhana is also there. The assembly was amazed to hear this story. Vidura concluded, "This was what I heard from Yudhisthira. When I was passing through the forest, I saw for myself the Rakshasa's body after being smashed by Bhima's blows." Dhritarashtra sighed and said nothing. He was becoming increasingly anxious. Bhima had promised to kill all his sons. Who or what could ever prevent him from fulfilling his promise? The king's heart burned with fear and anguish. Chapter 24, Yudhishthira's Moral Instructions. When Krishna heard the news that the Pandavas had been exiled, he decided to go and see them in the forest. He invited Balaram, Drishtadyumna, Shikhandi, and many other kings to accompany him, along with Subhadra and her son, and together they rode to the Kamyaka forest. Seeing Yudhishthira and his brothers dressed in deer skins and stripped of their kingdom, both Balaram and Krishna were enraged. Krishna said, "I cannot tolerate this injustice. The earth shall drink the blood of Duryodhana, Karna, Shakuni, and that fourth one, Dushasan. After we kill them and their followers, we will install Dharmaraj on the throne. Those cunning men deserve to be slain. This is quite in accord with the eternal morality." Can you imagine? If Krishna is feeling like this about someone, what is that person's fate? Krishna is saying, "I cannot tolerate this injustice. The earth shall drink the blood of Duryodhana, Karna, Shakuni, and Dushasan." They are doomed, right? So Krishna's anger blazed. It seemed as if he were about to consume the creation. Arjun quickly sought to pacify him by recollecting his many wonderful deeds. "O Krishna, the great rishi Vyasadeva has told me that you are the cause of creation, the mover of all minds, and the beginning and end of all things. All asceticism rests in you, who are the embodiment of all sacrifice and the eternal supreme person. All the gods depend upon you, and you are the origin of the universal creator Brahma. O mighty armed Keshava, you have appeared many times on earth in different incarnations. Accepting Krishna as the cause of even the Almighty Vishnu, Arjun described the various Vishnu avatars who had appeared in past ages. O Krishna, as Narasimha, you slew the mighty Asura Hiranyakashipu. As Aditi's son Vamana, you spanned the entire universe with 3 steps. O soul of all beings, covering the heavens, you dwell in the body of the sun and imbue him with your own effulgence." Arjun went on to describe Krishna's activities in his present appearance. "You have killed numerous demonic kings who were fierce enemies of even the gods. O Janardhan, you have manifest here on earth the sacred and eternal city Dwaraka, which abounds in opulence and is always crowded with rishis. Envy, untruth, malice, and cruelty are absent in you, who are always the well wishing friend of all creatures. Narada has told me that at the end of the Yuga, all things, mobile and immobile, will enter your body. O Krishna, there is no limit to your glories. I have spoken only a minute part." As he spoke, Arjun felt himself becoming overpowered by transcendental ecstasy. So this is the effect. When you glorify the Supreme Lord, by that glorification you become ecstatic. So Arjun was glorifying Krishna to pacify Krishna, but meanwhile, as he was glorifying, he was entering into transcendental ecstasy. His voice choked up and he was unable to continue. Pleased and pacified by Arjun's expression of love, Krishna said, "You are mine and I am yours. Samoham sarvabhuteshu name dveshyosti na priyaha ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya maite teshu chapyaham." You are in me and I am in you, like that. You are mine and I am yours. All that is mine is yours. He who hates you also hates me, and he who follows you also follows me. This also we discussed, if you remember, in Bhagavad Gita, right? In that verse only. Maite teshu chapyaham means what? That means not only is Krishna favorable to his devotee, he becomes attached to the devotee. Anyone who considers the devotee to be his enemy, Krishna treats that person as Krishna's enemy, as his enemy. Anyone who is envious of Krishna's devotee, Krishna will consider that as his personal enemy and he will destroy that person. An example is Hiranyakashipu, right? As Nrsimhadev. Because Hiranyakashipu was torturing Prahlad Maharaj, the Lord thought, this is my enemy, I must finish him up, like that. So Krishna is telling Arjun, he who hates you also hates me, and he who follows you also follows me. Formerly you were Nara and I was Narayan. Though individuals, we are as one. No one can understand our oneness and difference. Draupadi, her dark beauty enhanced by her soft deerskin clothes, came forward with folded palms and said to Krishna, O irrepressible one, all the great rishis have described you as the supreme person. The entire universe exists in you, and you are the refuge of all ascetics and sages. Even as children sport with their toys, so do you sport with the celestials. Those seeking your protection are never overcome by calamity. O slayer of demons, how is it how is it then that one like me, the wife of the Pandavas, the sister of Dhrishtadyumna, and your friend, could have been so insulted by the Kauravas? Draupadi's dark eyes filled with tears as she spoke. Subhadra also wept as she stood with her arm around Draupadi's shoulder. As she recalled the dice game, Draupadi became angry. Why, O Krishna, did my 5 powerful husbands sit silently while I was humiliated by wicked men of no importance? Fie upon Bhima's arms and Arjun celebrated Gandiva, for they could not protect a woman in distress, not even their wife. Fie upon Bhishma and Dhṛtarāṣṭra. Although I am their daughter-in-law, they were prepared to see me a slave. Draupadi hid her face with her soft hands, which resembled lotus buds. Her shoulders shook as she cried. Regaining her composure after a few moments, she took a deep breath and concluded, O Krishna, you are my only shelter. I deserve your protection for 4 reasons. Due to our family relationship, our friendship, the respect you bear for me, and the fact that you are my Lord. Krishna replied, O fair lady, you will see the wives of those with whom you are angry weep as you now weep when their husbands lie dead on the battlefield, their bodies covered with arrows and weltering in blood. Do not grieve. I shall do for the Pandavas whatever lies within my power. You shall be the queen of kings. I speak the truth. The heavens may fall and the Himalayas move. The earth may be rent and the ocean dry up. But know for certain, O Draupadi, that my words will never prove false. Draupadi was solaced by Krishna's words. She did not doubt that he acted only for her ultimate welfare. The princess glanced across at Arjun, who said, O lotus eyed lady, do not weep. What Krishna has said will come to pass. It cannot be otherwise. Standing by his sister's side, Dhrishtadyumna declared, I shall slay Drona. Our brother Shikhandi will kill Bhishma. Bhima will kill Duryodhana, and Arjun will kill Karna, who offered you such unbearable offense in the Sabha. Dear sister, with Rama and Krishna's assistance, even Indra cannot conquer us. What then can be said of Dhritarashtra's sons? All present now turned again toward Krishna. Looking at Yudhiṣṭhira, Krishna said, O Lord of the earth, had I not been otherwise engaged at the time, I would have personally come to prevent the gambling match. By pointing out the evils associated with gambling, I would have gained the support of Bhishma, Drona, Kripa, and Bahlika. Between us, we would surely have swayed the blind king from his crooked purpose. The Brahmins present gathered around to hear Krishna speak, and he glanced at them with affection. Indulgence in illicit sex, gambling, hunting, and intoxication are the four evils which beset men and deprive them of their prosperity. Gambling is particularly marked by the destruction of property, by misfortune, and by the squandering of wealth. It leads only to harsh words and enmity. Krishna said he would have pointed this out to Dhritarashtra, and if the king did not listen, he would have used force to bring him to his senses. And if anyone had supported the king in his ignorance, I would have destroyed them all. All this would surely have taken place, O king, if I had not been away from Dwaraka at the time. It was only upon my return that Satyaki informed me of the events in Hastinapur. Immediately upon receiving the news, I came here. My heart is pained to see you now, overtaken by calamity and sunk into misfortune. Yudhishthira asked Krishna where he had been during the gambling match. Krishna explained that he had gone to do battle with a king named Shalva, a friend of Shishupal. When Shalva heard that Krishna had killed Shishupal, remember at the end of Rajasuya, Shishupal was killed. When Shalva heard that Krishna had killed Shishupal, he went to Dwaraka and attacked the city while Krishna was still in Indraprastha. Shalva owned a great airship which resembled a flying city. He had received this wonderful airship as a gift from Shiva. In battle, he used it as a base from which to attack his foes. Raining down weapons of every kind, he had challenged Krishna, not realizing he was absent from Dwaraka. After wreaking havoc in Dwaraka, he had returned to his own city. Because Yudhishthira was interested, Krishna described in detail the fight that had taken place between Shalva and Dwaraka's warriors. He then told the Pandava how, after returning to Dwaraka and hearing of Shalva's attack, he had gone personally to fight him. A terrible battle ensued. Shalva had acquired great mystic power through his performance of asceticism. While he was fighting with Krishna, he created an illusion and seemingly killed Krishna's father Vasudeva right on the battlefield. By his mystic power, Shalva also sent showers of arrows, clubs, winged darts, lances, thunderbolts, bullets, rockets, swords, axes, and other weapons down upon Krishna and his forces. In the end, Krishna killed Shalva and destroyed his airship with the Sudarshan Chakra. Krishna concluded his narration. That is why, O Yudhishthir, I was unable to come to Hastinapur. The dice match took place just after I had slain Shalva and was engaged in restoring Dwaraka back to its former condition. If I had come, Duryodhana would not now be alive and the gambling match would never have taken place. What can I do now? It is difficult to stem the tide when the dam is broken. Krishna stood up to leave. He could do nothing for the Pandavas until the end of the 13 years. He knew that Yudhishthira and his brothers were too virtuous to break their word. They would doubtlessly remain in the forest for the full period. Krishna therefore told them that he would return to see them at the end of their exile. If Duryodhana did not return their kingdom, he said, then he knew there would be a battle in which the Kaurava and his followers would be annihilated. The Pandavas bade Krishna and his party farewell, and Arjuna especially bid an affectionate goodbye to Subhadra and their young son Abhimanyu, closely followed by Drishtadyumna and the other monarchs, Krishna left the forest on his golden chariot, which shone like the sun. As the thunderous sound of the chariot wheels died away into the distance, Yudhiṣṭhira ordered his brothers to make ready for their own departure. He wanted to enter more deeply into the Kamyaka forest and find a suitable place where they might spend their exile. Still accompanied by hundreds of Brahmins, the brothers made their way into the forest. After some time, they came to a great lake called Dwaitavana. Swans, chakravarkas, and other graceful birds swam in its waters, and the lake's edges were crowded with red, blue, and white lotuses, which were so fragrant that the air was heavy with their perfume. Numerous fruit trees loaded with golden fruits grew all around the lake. Peacocks, chakoras, cuckoos, and other birds, all singing beautiful songs, played in the trees. The brothers also saw many siddhas and charanas sporting in the woods, and on the lake shore, the numberless rishis sitting motionless at the water's edge, their minds fixed on the supreme Brahman. Yudhishthira was delighted. The area was beautiful. They would live there. The brothers rested beneath a large banyan tree, looking like five great elephants sitting by the side of a mountain. Daumya then performed sacred rituals to sanctify the place where they would build their cottages, and then they began construction. Living in that forest, the Pandavas resembled a number of Indras amid the celestials. They served the rishis and Brahmins by offering them excellent fruits and roots. Daumya and other priests would perform daily sacrificial rites in honor of the gods and the Pandavas' ancestors. They thought constantly of Krishna and passed their time hearing the Brahmins recite Vedic texts. Soon after their arrival at Dwaitavana, the ageless rishi Markandeya visited them. It was said that Markandeya had lived since the dawn of creation and knew of everything that had occurred in the history of the universe. He had lived since the dawn of creation and knew of everything that occurred in the history of the universe. Markandeya Rishi, he's still there. He greeted the Pandavas with affection and accepted their worship. The Rishi, whose body was effulgent with spiritual light and who appeared to be a youth of 16. He's there since the beginning of creation and he looks like Sukadeva Goswami, 16-year-old. So, the Rishi, whose body was effulgent with spiritual light and who appeared to be a youth of 16, smiled to see them. They reminded him of Ram and Lakshman. The Pandavas reminded Markandeya Rishi of Ram and Lakshman, who had been exiled to the forest hundreds of thousands of years previously. The sage had also visited them. He visited Ram and Lakshman when they were in the forest. Since arriving in the forest, Yudhishthira had felt grief at what he had caused, beginning to engulf him. I'll read it again. Since arriving in the forest, Yudhishthira had felt grief at what he had caused. Okay, so the result, whatever is happening to them, he is the cause for that. So, remembering that all this is, I am the cause for all this, he's experiencing grief, and that grief was beginning to consume him, engulf him. Seeing Markandeya smiling, he asked, O illustrious one, all these ascetics here are sorry to see our plight. How is it that you alone smile with delight? I am not delighted, my child. Rather, I am amazed at how much your situation resembles the life of Dasharath's son Ram. He too suffered due to his unfailing truthfulness, and he too lived in the forest, exiled for some years. I remember seeing him thousands of years ago wandering Mount Rishyamukha with his bow. Like you, Ram was high souled and innocent, and like you, he lived in the forest out of filial obedience to his father. This is why I am smiling. No matter how powerful each of us may be, we cannot avoid the calamities that arrive through destiny. No one, therefore, should ever act unrighteously, thinking I am powerful. Markandeya then assured Yudhiṣṭhira that, like Ram, he too would regain his kingdom from the Kauravas when his period of exile was over. After promising to come again while they were in the forest, he headed to the north. When the Pandavas dwelt at Dwaitavana, the air was constantly filled with the sounds of Vedic recitations. The entire region was as holy as Brahma's abode. The sounds of mantras from the Yajur, Rig, and Samavedas, charming and delightful to the mind, were mingled with the twang of the Pandavas' bowstrings. They honed their martial skills by hunting dangerous forest animals. In accordance with scriptural codes, they maintained the population of tigers, boar, buffaloes, and other beasts in the Kamyaka forest, protecting the rishis from attack as they engaged in meditation and sacrifice. So they controlled the population of wild animals, keeping it at bay, right? Like that. Yudhishthira loved the company of Brahmins. Now that he lived in their midst, his mind felt serene and his grief dissipated. All the world's greatest rishis had come to Dwaitavana to be with him. Narada, Vyasadeva, Vasishta, Bhrigu, Angira, Kashyapa, and others. And they all worshipped Yudhishthira as the celestial sages worship Indra in heaven. Yudhishthira also returned their worship and spent his time discussing with them about spiritual topics. He was actually starting to enjoy forest life. In many ways, he found it preferable to the onerous and often harsh duties of being a king. The gentle son of Dharma was happy to live a simple life of spirituality, but he always kept in mind his God given duty as a Kshatriya. That responsibility could not be whimsically abandoned, even if unpleasant. Duty must always be done for the Lord's pleasure. It was thus with mixed feelings that Yudhishthira dwelt in the forest, awaiting the day when he could again resume his duties as a ruler. Draupadi, however, was still sorrowful. She found the course of events that led up to their exile difficult, and she burned with the humiliation they had all received at Duryodhana's hands. Sitting alone one evening with Yudhishthir, she revealed her feelings. O king, when I think of the wicked Duryodhana and his followers living happily in Hastinapur, after having sent you to the forest, my heart burns. Without doubt, he is delighting in our misfortune. When you set out for the forest, all the Kurus cried, except the wretched Duryodhan, Karna, Shakuni, and that vicious Dushasan. Draupadi again found herself weeping. She remembered her parting words with Kunti and Gandhari. Both of them had grieved at her humiliation. How long would it be before she was avenged and the wrongdoers punished? Seeing you seated here on this grass mat and remembering your ivory throne crusted with jewels, I feel such anguish that I can hardly look at you. Your body is smeared with mud from the river bank when once it was daubed with the finest sandalwood paste. You once wore costly silk garments, now you wear deerskins and tree bark. How can I bear to see my other husbands, who were once waited upon by numerous servants, now scouring the forest for food? Draupadi's sorrow suddenly turned to anger. All this is due to the evil schemes of sinful men. O king, does your plight not arouse anger in you? Why are you so peaceful? Look at Bhima, glancing at you again and again. Constrained only by his love for you, he does not rise up and destroy the Kauravas. Honoring your promise, he sits containing his anger. Look too at Arjun. He understands Bhima's mind and is forever pacifying him. By the power of Arjun's bow, thousands of kings were obliged to wait upon the Brahmins at your Rajasuya. Now that same Arjun has become grief stricken. Does this not make you angry? And look at Madri's youthful sons. They are as dear to you as they are to your mother Kunti. Now they are forced to live the hard lives of ascetics. Does this not make you angry? I cannot understand why you have not risen up to destroy the Kauravas. Surely, after all that has happened, such a response would be in accord with morality. Is your discrimination failing? It is always appropriate for a Kshatriya to show anger when sin is committed. and sin has surely been committed by the Kauravas. How can you sit here as if you forgive them? If a king cannot distinguish between the time to be angry and the time to forgive, then he is lost. I also know the scripture. Scripture states that Duryodhana and his brothers deserve to be punished. Scripture states that the humble and ever forgiving person is always neglected, while he who is powerful and assails others at the proper time is respected as a king. Nice, huh? Scripture states that the humble and ever forgiving person is always neglected, while he who is powerful and assails others at the proper time is respected as a king. Yudhiṣṭhira looked with compassion upon his wife. She had suffered so much, and if anything stirred his heart, it was her suffering, for which he felt he had been the cause. Yes, his heart still burned when he thought of how she was dragged into the assembly hall. The pain of that moment would stay with him for the rest of his life. But this was not the time to make war. Draupadi could not understand the entire situation. He replied gently, O intelligent lady, through anger we may sometimes gain wealth, but anger ultimately destroys mankind. Real prosperity crowns one who conquers anger and brings adversity to one whom anger controls. I'll read that again. Real prosperity crowns one who conquers anger and brings adversity to one who, whom anger controls. Anger is the root of all destruction. An angry man commits sin blindly. An angry man will kill even his preceptor and insult his elders. He cannot distinguish between right and wrong. There is nothing an angry man might not say or do, even to the point of sending himself to death's abode. Knowing this, I will not indulge in anger. Draupadi, rather I will strive to control it. Draupadi listened respectfully. She knew her husband's grasp of religion and morality was unsurpassed. He was capable of instructing even the gods. Sitting on a simple mat of kusha grass, Yudhishthira continued, when a weak man is oppressed by one more powerful, he should not display anger, lest he bring about his own destruction. There are no blessed regions in the hereafter for those who destroy themselves. Thus, the weak should always control their anger. Only fools praise anger, considering it equivalent to energy. The wise keep anger at a distance. The man consumed by anger does not easily acquire generosity, dignity, courage, skill, or the other attributes possessed by men of character. The wise consider him a man of character who restrains his wrath. The pious always praise such a man because they understand the forgiving man is always victorious. One who represses his anger, even when antagonized, rejoices in the next world. For this it is said that a wise man, whether strong or weak, and even if in difficulty, should always forgive his persecutor. By now, Yudhishthir's brothers had gathered and were listening. Yudhishthir went on describing the glories of forgiveness. If there were not persons in this world who exercised forgiveness, then chaos would soon prevail. If kings and other superiors give way to anger, then the distressed people would quickly meet with ruin. If inferiors do not tolerate their superiors' admonishments, then sin will take root and destroy mankind. If inferiors do not tolerate their superiors' admonishments, then sin will take root and destroy mankind. I shall cite to you the verse spoken in ancient times by the rishi Kashyapa. Forgiveness is virtue, forgiveness is sacrifice, and forgiveness is the Vedas. Forgiveness is purity and penance. It is truth, piety, religion, and the holy Narayan. Through forgiveness, the universe is sustained, and by practicing forgiveness, a man can attain to everlasting regions of bliss. How then can I renounce forgiveness, O Draupadi? in which is, sorry again, how can I renounce forgiveness, O Draupadi, in which is established spirituality, truth, wisdom, and the three worlds. Both this world and the next belong to the forgiving person. Therefore, forgiveness is considered the highest virtue. Yudhishthira smiled at his wife. Bhishma, Drona, Vidur, Kripa, and the other Kuru elders desire peace. Vyasadeva and the other rishis also praise peace, Panchali. Therefore, let us first try for a peaceful settlement. If Dhritarashtra yields to temptation and does not return our kingdom, then the Bharat race will be destroyed. But let me not be the cause, princess. Forgiveness and humility, both of which are unknown to Duryodhana, are the qualities of the self controlled. They constitute eternal virtue. I shall therefore adopt them. Draupadi was still doubtful. If virtue conferred victory and success on a man, then how could Yudhishthira have undergone such a calamity? He had never strayed from virtue at any time. Even during the gambling match, he acted only with virtuous intentions. Now he was cast into misfortune, while the sinful Duryodhana enjoyed prosperity. The princess said, "It seems to me, O king, that although you always protect virtue, virtue has not protected you. Even the celestials know that you live only by virtue. I am sure you would abandon me and your brothers before abandoning virtue. You serve the Brahmins with everything you possess. You never disregard your elders, equals, or even inferiors. Although you conquered the earth, you did not become proud. You have performed great sacrifices, and given unlimited charity. Even now, while living a life of hardship in this forest, your virtue has suffered no diminishment." Draupadi looked at her husband in the eyes as she made her point. "Despite all this, still your intelligence was perverted by destiny, and you gambled away everything, your wealth, kingdom, brothers, even me. How could one like you, who are simple, gentle, modest, liberal, and truthful, be drawn to gambling? Gambling is a vice. I just cannot understand how it is possible." Although Draupadi understood that everything was under the control of the Supreme Lord, she felt her faith challenged by Yudhishthir's seemingly inexplicable situation. "Surely, O king, all creatures are made to act by the Lord, even as a puppet is moved by its controller. No one can pass a moment independently. God ordains our happiness and distress in accord with the results of our past actions. Everyone depends upon the Lord. He brings us together and uses us as instruments to fulfill each other's karma. It thus seems to me that it is the Lord who has brought about your calamity. But how has he sanctioned such injustice, so contrary to the ways of virtue and truth? And if he is not to blame, then it means that the controlling principle is who has the most power. If actions are not bound by God given consequences, then I lament for those who are not powerful." Yudhishthir could see that his wife was bewildered by grief and sorrow. "O gentle lady, born from sacrifice, although your speech is sweet and well articulated, it is atheistic. None should ever perform virtue with a desire to gain its fruits." Important. None should ever perform virtue with a desire to gain its fruits. Such a sinful trader of virtue will never reap the results. I practice virtue only because I desire to follow the Vedas and satisfy the Lord. The Vedas state that he who doubts virtue is destined to be born among the brutes. He who doubts religion, virtue, and the words of the rishis is excluded from the regions of immortality and bliss. Such a person is considered lower than a thief. Draupadi bowed her head as her husband continued. "O thin-waisted lady, you have seen with your own eyes the results of virtue in such immortal sages as Markandeya, Vyasadeva, Maitreya, and the celestial sage Narada. All these shining and ever blissful rishis describe virtue as the foremost duty. If the pieties practiced by the virtuous bore no fruits, then this world would long ago have been covered by darkness. None would have pursued liberation, nor cared to acquire knowledge or even wealth. All men would have lived like beasts, and the world would be thrown into confusion. So that means my practicing dharma, it's not just that I'm going to benefit from this. Whatever good things are still happening, right? Rains are coming, trees are giving us fruits, crops are producing grain, we get some food to eat, we have some shelter. All this is happening because of the few people who are still adhering to dharma. That's the point. It's not that dharma is not bearing its result. But at the same time, a person performing dharma shouldn't think, I'm doing this dharma so that I will be benefited, I will get wealth, I will have no problems in life. That's not why we should do dharma. That's the point. The Brahmins, who had by now also come to hear Yudhishthir's speech, nodded in agreement. Darkness had set in, and fires now burned in the great clearing where they sat. Draupadi could hear the flames crackling, as well as the sounds of crickets, as Yudhishthir continued. Do not doubt virtue, because you do not see its results, Panchali. Without doubt, the fruits will manifest in time, as will the fruits of sin. The fruits of true virtue are eternal and indestructible, leading one to the highest regions of happiness. Therefore, do not speak ill of God. Try to understand the Supreme Being and His desires. O Draupadi, always bow to Him. This will be for your own good. Tears fell from Draupadi's eyes. She knew her husband's words were true. Surely God was infallible and always the well wishing friend of all living beings. But who could understand God? His activities were inscrutable. No one could understand his plans, the apparent reversal of the virtuous Pandavas, and even that the reversal had seemingly come through Yudhishthir's own inexplicable actions was incomprehensible and quite incredible. Draupadi sighed. I accept what you have said, O best of men. The Lord is certainly bestowing upon all beings the fruits of their own work. Even if some sudden calamity or good fortune befalls us, we must understand it to be the results of some action in a former life. But besides destiny, there is exertion. A man who does not exert himself will eventually be ruined. I feel you should exert yourself now to recover your kingdom. Even if you fail, you will at least have satisfied everyone that you did all that human endeavor can accomplish. Although the results are not in our hands, we should still perform our work. The wise always condemn inaction. Why then do you remain inactive? This is my doubt. Draupadi fell silent. Then, stirred by her words, Bhima felt impelled to speak. He too was angry and found the forest almost unbearable. It was not the austerity he minded, but the thought of Duryodhana and his brothers enjoying their ill gotten gains. Why did Yudhishthir suffer in silence? Draupadi was right. It was time for them to act. Bhima burst out, O Yudhishthir, what do you hope to gain by living like an ascetic? You are not a yogi, but a king. You should walk the path of kings. Duryodhana robbed you of your kingdom. He is like a weak, what's offal? I don't know, offal eating jackal, stealing the prey of lions, remains maybe. How do you tolerate it? How can you abandon the wealth that was both our source of virtue and pleasure in exchange for this trifling virtue called keeping your promise? Surely you fail to see what is of true value. Yudhishthira remained calm while Bhima vented his long pent up anger. The forest reverberated with his words, his voice as deep and powerful as a kettle drum. O king, it was only due to your carelessness that we lost our kingdom. Only to please you did we allow Duryodhana and his brothers to wrest from us our wealth and afflict us with such pain. On your command, we now pain our friends and enliven our enemies. Surely it was folly that we did not kill the Kauravas then and there. Instead, we have meekly come to the forest and act worthy only of weak men. Krishna does not approve, nor does Arjun, the twins, or myself. O king, has your despair led you to lose your manliness on the plea of virtue? Only cowards cherish despair, being unable to win back what they have lost. Bhima argued that so-called virtue which produced calamity was not virtue at all. What use was virtue for its own sake? Kings should practice virtue to make their kingdoms prosperous and to achieve pleasure. All three things, virtue, profit, and pleasure, should be pursued equally. None of them should be sought at the cost of the others. Have you lost sight of your proper duty? You are a powerful warrior supported by other powerful men. Use that power to regain your rightful kingdom. When you have established your rule, then acquire religious merit by ruling piously and giving charity to the Brahmins. By giving up this promise to stay in the forest, you will be casting aside an inferior principle for the greater good. Bhima softened. The Brahmins and the people want you to rule them. They all despise Duryodhana. You are capable of taking back your kingdom, and you have Arjuna and myself to help you. Who can withstand us in battle? Let us use strategy and strength to win back what is ours. This is our duty. Yudhishthira remained silent for some moments as he summoned patience. He looked up at Bhima. O descendant of Bharata, I cannot reproach you for giving me pain with your arrow like words. It is true that due to my folly I have brought this calamity upon us. I knew I could not defeat Shakuni at dice, yet I allowed myself to be drawn into the game. I should have exerted greater control over myself. O Bhima, the mind cannot be controlled when it comes under the influence of manliness, pride, and promise. I do not censure you for what you have said, but I do consider what has happened to us to be preordained. Yes. Yudhiṣṭhira made it clear that he would not break his promise. Do you recall the conditions of the final dice game? Shakuni said, he who loses this game shall go to the forest and remain there for 13 years. The winner shall take his kingdom and return it when the forest term has expired. I then uttered, so be it. Yudhishthir hung his head and fell silent as he remembered that day. What had overcome him? He had thought he was acting only for virtue, but as a result, all his loved ones had suffered. Still, he was resolute. No matter how painful their present situation, there was no turning back. He would not abandon his promise. The agreement would be kept. Yudhishthir was firm. How then, O Bhima? Shall I now falsify my word for the sake of wealth? To me, nothing is greater than truth. For a respectable person, it is better to die than to transgress his word. Let us pass our days here in peace. Better days will come. A farmer scatters seeds and awaits the harvest. In the same way, virtue and truth always bring results in time. Do not doubt this principle. Bhima was not convinced. His heart was too full of anger. He had not even been able to sleep since coming to the forest. Neither could he face the prospect of waiting so many years before he could vent his rage on the Kauravas. What virtue had they ever observed? Why then should Yudhishthir treat them as honorable? Did he think they respected his virtue and adherence to truth? They saw him as weak and were laughing at him. If only Yudhishthir would see, sense, and order them to gear up for battle. Bhima tried again to convince him. O great king, how can any mortal make a promise that is dependent on the passage of time? No one knows when his life will end. We have now been in the forest for 13 months. Let that be our 13 years. Indeed, the Vedas state that in certain circumstances a month can substitute for a year. Let us go now and crush our enemies. Even if we were to go to hell on that day, that hell will feel like heaven. Although only Draupadi and I have revealed our hearts to you on this matter, Arjun, the twins, Kunti, and our many allies share the same feelings. Only because they seek to please you do they remain silent. It is only weakness that forces you to adhere to your pledge, dear brother. No one is praising you for your kindly disposition toward our enemies. Bhima stood silhouetted by the fire. Silhouetted by the fire.
Silhouetted.
Silhouetted by the fire. What does that mean?
It's like when someone stands or something is against the light and the light is from the back, then they're completely black. So that's what you call a silhouette.
Silhouetted, right? Silhouetted. Okay. So Bhima stood silhouetted by the fire. His huge frame resembled a blazing mountain. O king, although remaining fixed in virtue, you still cannot see the truth, like an ignorant man who has memorized the Vedas without knowing their meaning. That's why we recite, when we recite the Bhagavad Gita shlokas, we also do the translation so that we understand what we are reading, reciting. You are a Kshatriya, yet you act like a Brahman. A king's duties are fraught with crookedness and cunning. You know this well. This is still Bhimsen speaking. He's saying that you still cannot see the truth, like an ignorant man who has memorized the Vedas without knowing their meaning. You are a Kshatriya, yet you act like a Brahman. A king's duties are fraught with crookedness and cunning. You know this well. Bhima had another concern. How would they be able to live incognito for the 13th year? They were known throughout the world, and Duryodhana had many supporters. Numerous kings who had been subjugated by the Pandavas at the time of the Rajasuya now backed the Kauravas. Duryodhana would have his spies looking for them everywhere. Bound by Yudhishthira's promise, they would be living in the forest forever. Force would be the only way out. Sooner or later, Bhima implored Yudhishthira, please give the order for battle, O hero. There is no higher duty for a Kshatriya. If there be any sin in this course, then you can counteract it later by sacrifice and charity. Yudhishthira sighed again, but did not speak. Bhima was overcome by passion, he thought, and not thinking carefully. Could he not understand that their suffering had been somehow ordained by the Supreme Lord? All they could do now was follow their religious duties as prescribed by God, leaving the results in his hands. They could not please the Lord by abandoning religion, and to please God was always everyone's prime duty. Surely Bhima knew that. But there was another consideration. Yudhishthir's was a calm voice as he explained his mind to Bhima. O mighty armed hero, when a man performs sinful deeds depending upon his own power, such deeds become only a source of pain for him. But if he reflects carefully before action, he will attain success. Listen as I tell you what is likely to happen if we follow your suggestion, born as it is of pride and mental unrest. Yudhishthira then listed the many kings allied with Duryodhana. There was Bhishma, Drona, and Kripa. Out of obligation, they would certainly side with Duryodhana. Then there was Ashwathama, Karna, Bahlika, Bhurishravas, and Duryodhana's brothers. There were hundreds of other kings who would fight alongside the Kauravas because they had been previously defeated by the Pandavas. Duryodhana's treasury was full, especially as he now had control of Indraprastha. He could easily and quickly amass a vast army. On the other hand, the Pandavas had no position, no wealth, no army, and only a few allies. Duryodhana's forces are virtually unassailable. The Kuru chiefs are masters of the celestial weapons. I doubt that even Indra and all the gods could vanquish them. I especially fear Karna, who is impetuous, angry, invincible, accomplished in every weapon, and encased in impenetrable armor. Yudhishthira remembered how Karna had been born with a natural coat of armor on his body. Although he appeared to be a charioteer's son, it was obvious that his origin was in some way divine. For some reason, he harbored a deep envy of Arjun. One day, Yudhishthira knew Karna and Arjun would wage a great battle to settle their enmity. The skirmish at Draupadi's Swayamvara had been nothing. Karna had not wanted to exert himself against what he thought was a Brahman. But if he displayed his full power, then who could be sure that Arjun would be able to defeat him? Thinking of Karna and the danger he poses, I cannot sleep at night. Without overcoming him, we as well as all the other heroes I have mentioned, we will not be able to defeat Duryodhana. O best of men, consider all this carefully. Hearing his brother's admonition, Bhima became pensive. Yudhiṣṭhira was right, of course, and he could not argue with him. Although Bhishma, Drona, Karna, and the other kings in Hastinapur had always been their friends and well wishers, it was different now. If it came to war, they would surely side with the Kauravas. The thought of fighting against those invincible heroes was daunting, especially because he felt so much affection for them. Bhima sat down, defeated. As the Pandavas sat together in silence, Vyasadeva appeared out of the forest. They quickly stood up and bowed before the rishi. After taking a seat among them, the rishi said to Yudhiṣṭhira, O mighty armed one, I have divined your thoughts. I wish to help you, and therefore I have come. I will destroy the fever in your mind by telling you how to defeat Bhishma, Drona, Kripa, Karna, Duryodhana, and all his followers. Listen carefully. Vyasadeva then took Yudhishthira aside and spoke to him in private. He taught him the mystical skill called Pratismriti, then instructed him to teach the same skill to Arjuna. This skill allowed the practitioner to travel great distances in a short time. Thus, Arjuna could go to the Himalayas, approach the gods, and receive from them their celestial special weapons. Due to his asceticism and prowess, he is quite capable of approaching the celestials. Vyasadeva said, Indeed, he is Narayan's eternal associate. Indra, Rudra, and all the principal gods will surely bestow their weapons upon Arjuna, and he will perform tremendous deeds by receiving them. After giving Yudhishthira the Pratismriti mantras, Vyasadeva left. Just before leaving, he also told Yudhishthira to move to a different forest. Otherwise, the brothers might disturb the animal population in the Dwaitavana by hunting them excessively. Having lived there more than a year, they had killed many deer, tigers, boar, and other wild animals. Accompanied by the Brahmins whom they were supporting, Yudhishthira and his brothers moved to another part of the great Kamyaka forest, this time on the banks of the river Saraswati. It was a big chapter, so we went 15 minutes over. But thank you all for staying. Hare Krishna. I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.